All right, I am going to announce the roundtable discussion, and this is really kind of cool because it's the first time that so many of the witnesses to the haunting are actually coming together to discuss their views and their feelings on what happened 30 years ago. And before they do that, I just want to share real quickly some insight from my professional background as a criminal investigator and also a paranormal investigator when it comes to witnesses. We deal with witnesses all the time, obviously, in criminal investigations, and we count on very credible witnesses to be able to prove crimes in court. As a paranormal investigator, we also look at witnesses and credibility and try to back up what a lot of the reports are that we deal with. And in the course of both professions, I often have to deal with skeptics, and that's okay. Skeptics are fine, but they come up with all kinds of reasons of why things happen and why everybody who experiences a haunting is crazy, including myself. So, just to give you something to think about, when you look at witnesses for hauntings, you have to go back thousands of years. It's in every culture, it's on every continent, and something that I had looked into, I have a psychology background as well, and I look into people and a little bit of social factors. And one thing that comes to mind for me is the more intelligent we get as a planet, we should be dismissing a lot more hauntings for natural causes. And I think most of the paranormal investigators here would agree with me when I say just the opposite is occurring. The more intelligent we get, the more people are reporting having hauntings. And these are very, very credible people that report this stuff. So it's just something to think about, and tonight we have some very credible witnesses who went through a very incredible experience themselves. And I'm going to introduce Director Mara Petria, who is going to facilitate tonight's discussion.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Mark. You just saw him in the film here, and you can tell that he's a person of integrity, a person with a really impressive personal resume, as well as just being a great person. Thank you, Mark Hayes. I apologize right now because this is a situation where I'm in a professional capacity, but I'm in an emotional situation because this here is a dream come true. This panel of people who experienced something totally outside of their pen in 1985, those who witnessed it and documented it, those who heard about it, those who helped with it, they're all here. And I can tell you right now, I can speak volumes and volumes about why each single one of them is so priceless to 1985, right on up to the present day. But they don't get it. I look into their eyes when I say, oh my gosh, it's amazing to meet you, to talk with you. And they say, okay, me. And I say, yes, absolutely you. But the truth of the matter is, I've never seen a panel like this before. I've never seen Paul Davey, Craig Norris, Linda Fox-Kalasinski, Jay Jeff Unger, Krista Cesare, Charlie Manning. And I haven't seen anything like that with any other haunting. A group of people related back to these events on a scale that is international with the C2D1 haunting. It is unheard of, and I'll tell you this, you're all so thanked for being here, but we are all so lucky to be here with them. This will never happen again. It truly will not. People on Facebook say, oh, catch you next year. No dice. Not next year. This is the deal. This is invaluable. It's invaluable to me. I'm so happy, so I'm not going to waste another second before we start hearing from them firsthand. So I'm going to give them some initial inquiries to help in the discussion, some introductions. And I want you guys to really commit this to memory, because 30 years ago on this campus, Chris and Jeff went to the paranormal lecture by the Warrens. And whether it was that seminal event or not, that point in time sprang forth sci-fi, books, countless radio programs, movies, and again, international interest and interpersonal journeys. Who knows what tonight might mean to somebody 30 years from now. So, to set the stage, I'm going to first put this microphone down because I can be pretty loud on my own. And I want to ask the fabulous Linda Fox-Kalasinski if she doesn't mind letting us know what in the world was it like here in 1985. Set the stage for us, if you will. Erie Hall, 1985, the fashions, maybe a movie, things you like to do for fun, any of that, please go ahead.
Well, you gotta remember scrunchies. The jam shorts, everything was neon, very bright colored, big sweaters, leggings, kind of sounds like what we're back now, acid wash jeans, let's see, how about some music? My music, I wasn't everybody's, but I like Duran Duran. Madonna was just coming up. She had Desperately Seeking Susan. The Police, of course. U2. Dr. Demento. Sunday night. It's Saturday night. Wham. But you could also hear Stairway to Heaven, of course. Let's see. One thing I remember, and it may not have been of '85, it may be a little bit later, is that we didn't have CDs yet. We still were in the boombox with the cassette tapes. I went and did a class about public speaking, and even now my voice is like shaking. But you had to talk about something, and somebody's like, coming up, you're gonna have this little round disc that's gonna have a whole album on. You won't have to have the big album, the LP, that you have to go up against Sundance. And we're like, you gotta be kidding me, because they were like $30, they were saying. So, another thing is, there was a media store on Main Street that you had to rent your VCR. And then you had to rent the tapes to go in the VCR. So that was something I remember. 10-cent wings on Friday night, happy hour. Yes. John Hughes, of course, the movies, 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, Footloose. Okay, how's that?
That is incredible, is what that is. So this is Linda Fox-Kalasinski. You saw the wonderful actress, Dawn Sobolewski. She came up here. She bared her heart and soul here because this story means so much to her after having been a part of the Please Talk With Me process, and also just the journey of this story from 2009 until the present. And that's how long I've been researching this hardcore, about 6+ years now. She is a person of just a beautiful soul, and she has great intellect, and she really respects what everybody had to offer and was a part of back in 1985. And so I'm just beyond honored that you're here in person. Like, talking with you on the phone blew my mind. Her being here is magnificent. And she talked a little bit about music, which is such a huge part of the 80s. We look back and we feel that sort of electronic vibe, the keyboards. But somebody who I know knows even maybe a little bit more to elaborate on it is Paul Davey. He did the incredible concert here. The Rolling Gumbies. I've heard tell of this college band. You mentioned it a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? And did anybody ever record any of those music sessions?
Gee, I wonder who could have recorded and documented rehearsals of a band in Erie Hall. Yeah. You know, the fun thing about Rolling Gumbies was it was a party band. We played Louie Louie and Good Lovin', as you heard before, and Twist and Shout. We even played At the Hop. You know, it's like we had no shame. We were playing all the oldies while everybody else was wearing spandex and blown up hair and singing ah up there. No, we were we were trying to be a fun band, and so you know and then I went on to a different band in '86 and '87 called Rye, R-H-Y-E, and I asked them, you know, I don't know why they named it that. It's just, they looked at a loaf of bread and said, Rye. Okay, fine. But the funny thing is that, you know, with Rye, we would play that song, I got a little change in my pocket going jangling, and the crowd went nuts. And I remember playing GJ's, rest in peace, and Mike Lamo was singing it. And I was playing bass, and all my Sigma Nu brothers like grabbed me, and all of a sudden I'm playing bass and body surfing, and I'm like, oh my God! So, by the way, funny thing, Mike Lamo was my bandmate. Mike has gone out. He works in the fashion district in New York. He's actually a Bram Stoker award-winning novelist, so in the horror genre. So, you know, meanwhile, the drummer, Jeff Meisel, Sick Top, Partiers and all that stuff, he's now, you know, everyone has their right to live life the way they want, but a born-again Christian. So I think it's very funny that you know, the music in my band drove one to write about horror stories and the other one to find God. And, you know, it's like, life is so funny. Life is really funny. But music-wise, yeah, there was also, let's see, Duran. I remember, remember Opie and Anthony, the very famous DJ team. Opie is a graduate here. Greg Hughes is his name. And he used to play Stevie Ray Vaughan and What I Like About You, Paradise by the Dashboard Light, White Lines, you know, all that stuff. And it's, yeah, it's all coming back, right? It's all coming back. But that was GJ's in the in-between. Yes. Meanwhile, my wife Linda DJ'd a little bit at the Idle Hour. And what are a couple of bands that you had there that you used to play?
Many of them were mentioned, but I also was doing David Bowie and Iggy Pop and Billy Idol, and it was actually, you talk about now the range of music that we hear, we were actually pretty good. We had a pretty broad range as well, different genres of music. So.
That's right, that's right. And you forgot the word mullet.
I did forget.
I had one.
She wanted to forget the word mullet.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. He mentioned that it's true. He lived in a dormitory very nearby, Erie Hall, and it was, I believe, the next semester, he started to hear these rumors about the ghosts. And the fascinating thing about that is he didn't hear it from Chris. They were keeping this on the down low, as they would have said 10 years ago. They were keeping this quiet. And he heard it from, you know, it's just somebody else on campus, and that's just amazing. You mentioned the documentation by J. Jeff Ungar, and it's interesting to think that Jeff was an entity that moved of his own accord before the haunting. He was a person who took pictures, took journal notes, there's things from Germany and things like that, and somebody's insight, who I think would be wonderful on that, and also just Geneseo in general. We have here publicly, and I got to again meet him in person for the first time. I've talked with him before, but in person, Craig Norris. Now this is awesome, and again, he probably thinks it's weird that I'm so excited by that, but I am, because you saw in this movie here, the gentleman with the bandana, he had the necklaces here. He spoke with Chris, and Chris, after that conversation, decided to go in and talk with this entity, this ghost, this person. And it's really, really magnificent to think about the effect that communicating with somebody can have in a life-changing moment. But before the haunting ever happened, you knew Jeff.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us anything about what it was like rooming with him, any things you guys like to talk about or do, activities, or anything like that?
Well, I was a freshman. They were all upperclassmen in the suite. I was the only freshman. And I remember I beat Ed and Jeff to the room. And I took the cot. There was a bunk bed and a cot. I took the cot, which I thought I'd have other freshman roommates, but I didn't. I had two upperclassmen. And they were so nice. And they were like, well, you keep the cot. You beat us here. And that was the beginning of a very nice relationship with those two gentlemen. I'm not so sure I would have graduated from Geneseo, which, by the way, is a very tough college to graduate from.
Yes.
Okay, well, very proud of that. And I want to thank these guys for it, because they showed me the way to get it done. Having said that, being tripled is very personal. There is no, you're not doing anything without the other guys knowing it. And that includes the guy next door, Jeff referenced how thin the walls were. We used to talk to each other through the walls. You could talk to your buddy, say, hey, Brian, what are you doing later on? Literally that thing. I do want to thank Mara and Jeff for recording it. My first comment to Jeff after seeing the film, a little uncomfortable seeing yourself in the shower like that, I got it. But in hindsight, the conversation strikes me as accurate, which is probably the best thing I could say about it. I don't remember the specific words. Some of them I did. I said to Jeff, I remember that part about the jeans. You know, I really do. As bizarre as it is, as soon as it went up there, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I still run. I've been running since 1977. I can't stop. People ask me why. I don't know. And that was the disconnect between Chris and I. We were teammates. All right? We ran together. We were competing for a position on the team together. So we competed with each other and against each other. So that was kind of in the air. I don't want to misportray our relationship because he's been nothing but kind to me. But we weren't really close. I'm not trying to distance ourselves right now because he's been nothing but kind and generous since. That conversation in the shower is basically me being shocked. I loved running. I ran. My folks hated it. I grew up on a farm. They're like, why are you running? You should be doing your chores. So I ran despite the fact everybody didn't want me to. He ran because everybody wanted him to, and I couldn't understand that. I'm like, why do you do this? So that was our relationship there. And you saw it boil out there in that scene, and again, it was very accurate. I remember being frustrated with him and saying, do something about it, And my comment to Jeff after was, any man that can fight naked can do anything. You can fight naked,
It's just not math.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. Thank you so much, Mr. Craig Norris. We also have, and I'm going to continue to gush here, somebody who we looked for. Somebody who in 2012, at the quarter century after the haunting, we came here for an anniversary, an alumni type of thing of sorts. When we were promoting the movie before it ever came out, we were looking for this person. We were looking for the person who blessed the room back in 1985. This was somebody that we heard from Mr. Christy Cesare about. He had this really powerful personal experience, and it was somebody that he was thankful to, because at a time when the paranormal was so taboo, it was the occult, it was something that you pushed away. This will ruin my career, this will ruin my reputation. I think it would mean a lot to me if somebody turned around and gave me some of their time, some credence, some care, some thought, and that person is Charlie Manning. Now, I am going to jump a little bit forward in time here because he has an amazing story. I hope he won't mind sharing because, as I said, we couldn't find him until something happened. Mr. Christy Cesare was on a radio show, little one you might have heard of, Coast to Coast AM, the biggest paranormal radio show there is, one of the biggest radio shows there are in general. Father Charlie Manning, will you please let us know what it was like?
I'm the serious one here. It was like a miracle took place. It was meant to happen, but I didn't know that. And back in 2012, you guys were looking for me. And at that time, I was in a hospital. I was fighting for my life at that time. I got hit with necrotizing fasciitis, better known as the flesh-eating bacteria. And I had to go through 14 surgeries. So that's why they couldn't find me at that time. Then, I was put on early retirement by the bishop. So yay, I've been retired for all these years. This is good. I can go out and do events like this. At the time all this happened, I was back in the hospital again for an infection. One of the things I insisted on is a radio to listen to when I was trying to get to sleep. Now this is nothing against George Noory, but the show I listened to was Coast to Coast AM with George Noory. And I was listening, I was half awake, and George was interviewing this guy by the name of Chris. And I was listening to it and thought, okay, this is something we get into here, paranormal stuff, and this is about haunting. But I wasn't really all that familiar with it. And it was when he said to George, it was Father Charlie Manning who took good care of me. I kind of woke up, knowing that this show is broadcast worldwide. And I'm going, everybody's hearing this. What's he talking about? But I promised myself that when they got back to home, I would Google Chris's name, and well, you're all over the internet. There was no way you could miss it. And where was I?
You Googled his name and you saw it all over the internet.
Oh, I reached out, that was right. Oh yeah, what I did was, I got onto Facebook. I'm on Facebook, addicted to it. And I've discovered he was on Facebook. So I sent him a private message. And in the private message, I said, I'm Father Charlie Manning. I'm Charlie Manning today. I'm tired. So, so I sent that private message saying all of that, and nothing. Nothing. 10 days went by.
He was busy. It was the other file.
Chris sort of explained that to me, why, a little later on. But at the time, I was sitting on my sofa with my darling midnight cat, who I think is, the way she acts lately, she's haunted. And it's midnight, you know. So another friend was sitting next to me, and when I saw on the TV screen the telephone ID showing Chris de Cesare, I just like, ah! And I put the speakerphone on, sorry. And Ty and I are listening, and I have to admit that Chris's excitement was so genuine, and he's, how would I say it?
That's pretty cool.
You were more than cool. Nobody had praised my efforts like he did on the phone like that, and I'm barely trying to remember them. And so he explained all this, and later all of it started coming back to me. I've been in ministry 28 to 30 years. A lot of things happened, and they all blended together after a while. But when he talked to me more specifically, I started to remember, yeah, I did that. What a powerful experience that was. Because when he, well, I had to ask those questions, those mean questions. What do you want? What are you drinking? Are you taking drugs? Or you're trying to make a fool out of the chaplain? Did you imagine word getting around the chaplain's going out and doing exorcisms? Wow, no thanks. But a very important thing came out of his response when he said to me something to the effect, I'm on Jesus. And I saw the fear in his eyes. Oh, was he scared? Here's a kid. At that time, actually, I was a baby priest. I was only in my 30s. There were a lot more experiences I was to have through all those years. But this was a call from God to get my rear end in gear and try to help this kid out. And that's what I did. I came to his dorm room with my prayer book, which it's called Pastoral Care for the Sick. Now, I determined him. I got to be very careful how I put this. Yes. It's a sacrament, the sacrament of the anointing of the sick. In some ways, his fear, this genuineness, the fact that he was a man of faith, whether he knew it or not, and he's asking for this kind of help. So, besides the prayer book, I came in with holy water. I brought holy water with me tonight, just in case. And candles were lit, and I proceeded to anoint my buddy here on the forehead, and I used holy water to all around the dorm room. Something else. Oh yeah, it was the prayers. At any rate, I was feeling something going on. I can't describe it in words what it was, but something was in this room. And as I watched the movie tonight, I learned from the movie Chris saying that Tommy respected those moments. I didn't realize that, but wow, that's why I feel truly honored to be here to make this witness. That's special.
Oh my goodness, wow. Thank you so much. Charlie Manning, that is an invaluable thing to say. An account is meaningful and something that I could never have hoped to have heard in my lifetime. Again, this is truly once in a lifetime, this event.
From the heart.
I feel that. He, as you saw, was in the film. He gave of himself for Paul, the first roommate who ended up having to leave due to the severity of what was going on, for Chris, and ultimately for everybody in that dormitory. They benefited from what he did. At that point in time, the haunting had gotten pretty dark, and eventually it did respect the boundaries, and having respected those boundaries, it did seem to reach out to other areas. And so, Mr. DeCesare, this is an uncomfortable thing to talk about, and you certainly don't have to, but I know a lot of people in the audience would be interested to know if you might say, when you were attacked in the shower and that person lashed out that way, what was it that allowed you to either hold on to hope or sanity or something that got you through that dark, scary moment?
Well, I didn't know it yet, but it's almost like this. You know, we all go through hard times in our lives, and don't always talk about them. We try to work through darkness and find some light. And if I had known this could happen like this, with these amazing people, it would have been easier. I didn't know that. I didn't know how to reach out. I didn't know how to share. My family had humble roots in mixed paint factories. They carried boxes in warehouses. To go to college was a great honor. It's more commonplace now. I don't want to be the first person to fail out of college. I have a certain pride in that. And as I lay there on the floor, it's a strange thing. You know, you read books sometimes, or you see movies, and you relate to them. I can imagine doing that. But it's so different being there. There's no wall to protect you. You can't turn it off. You can't change the channel. It's there. I really thought, for me, this was the end. Either because my mind couldn't understand what was happening and I couldn't function, or because that thing was going to just rip me apart. And in that moment, nothing I had done. It's something somebody else did. Jeff, he made a choice. He heard noise. He chose to walk in that door. And when I heard the door slide open, and the warm air came in, there was a hope. Maybe things would change, because I couldn't change anything. I couldn't move my arms, my legs, just watch that drop of water. And I heard the voice. It was at first muted, almost like, you know, like it was underwater. And eventually I heard it closer. I heard my name, and I felt these two hands grasping from behind, so to lift me up. But I wasn't scared by them. They seemed like they were helping me. And they were nervous, and their hands were shaking, and they lifted me up, and they turned me around, and I found this sort of face, and that was his face. And he said, "Are you okay? Are you all right? What happened?" Whew. And you know, there are people who act, and they act very well, and they get paid big money for that. But they're acting. I just want you to understand that when I had the opportunity, sure, of sharing those moments, it was hard for me because that's who I really am. That's my barest moment. And the reason I got through, and the reason that I was able to work through is because of friends and people like Jeff, Linda, Craig, from Charlie, Paul, who were there with me and said, "We got your back." Not the way the ghost did, a different way. And that's what it was. The people around me that trusted me enough and cared enough to say, "I don't understand this, but I'm here for you." And you don't allow that today in today's world. So thank you all. It's a dream.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cesare, for saying that. It's beautiful, and thank you for being here and for doing everything that you did to help make this day possible back in 1985, again, on up to the present. I'm so thankful. You mentioned friendships, and you did mention J. Jeff Ungar. Now, you would have seen him a bunch of times in the movie along with Chris. He's the gentleman who wrote down what are now called, not that he ever meant them to have a famous title, but the C2D1 Haunting journal notes that he actually had put away, I think 10 years ago or so. Something that he didn't want to have as a part of his life. This haunting has a positive ending right now, but you have to look at the whole path of it leading to this moment, and there have been ups and there have been some major downs, and I don't blame anyone for a moment for not wanting to always be immersed in thoughts of the paranormal and the hard, malevolent, extreme C2D1 haunting. And yet, when we did call him back in 2012, and he eventually brought them back to mind because researchers like Alan Lewis had made photocopies of these that survived, that Bill Edwards was made privy to, and that people like myself were inspired by. When he remembered them, he put forth his kindness and his bravery and his time, and again, his reputation, because even now, it's not like the paranormal is like, "Oh yeah, I definitely want to brandish that." People who are in the paranormal are brave. Each of these people is super, super brave for being here right now. I think that 100%. Now, thinking of going way back into sort of the beginning of the haunting, you weren't writing this particular paranormal event down, although you did take notes. There was a day, I think it was February 12th, 1985, you heard a banging on your dorm room door, and your friend, Krista Cesare, reported the terror of having seen a ghost. Can you tell us, please, what was it that made you hear him out? And what was it that made you start writing the C2D1 Haunting journal notes?
it's a moment that you can't anticipate. You know, this is so beyond the pale that you just react in the moment. And, you know, some people might have reacted by running the other way. I found myself actually running into the room trying to figure out what was going on. It became an issue where, you know, I could see the desperation in Chris's face, in his eyes. And he was terrified by something. And it was second nature for me at that moment to help. As I said, I couldn't have anticipated that reaction. You find out things about yourself in crisis. I guess that's one thing I found out about myself. I found myself running towards the crisis instead of away. That was revealing to me. And it became a responsibility that I took on willingly to stand by Chris during this time. When his first roommate left, shortly after the event started, I couldn't leave Chris in. I mean, his state of mind was such that you know, that would have been the nail in the coffin. So I moved in. I remember the first night, you know, Chris had the opportunity to switch beds, so I ended up sleeping where the ghost always appeared, right there in the corner. But, you know, I took one for the team there.
It was in my head. I was going to say that, and then you just said that.
Thank you for that. But I did that, and I actually had my own experience there that night, the first night I slept in C2D1. I wrestled with a shadow in the night in that spot. And I didn't tell Chris about that because I don't think he was ready to handle that. So for what it's worth, I am glad I was there for him. You know, we've got a strong bond now, and you know, I have the haunting to thank for that. And I have the haunting to thank for this. This is incredible. You know, the Warrens came here and lectured, and here we are talking back, you know, in the same spot almost that they were in. We're talking to you now, continuing the conversation. And I guess it's a privilege. After all these years, you know, we kind of see, as Mara said, you know, there's an art to these things. And we didn't know for the longest time that there was anything beyond the fear and the, you know, the regret or whatever. But this is so cool, you know? And I thank you guys for being a part of this, for just coming out and sharing the film with us and just talking with us. I mean, please talk with me. This is the conversation we're having now. So continue that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Does anybody out there have an eye on time? Because I have a bunch more questions, but I also want to see if I can get questions from the audience. I don't know.
10 to 9.
I have 10 minutes. Great. I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and then I'm going to hand it over to the audience. So be thinking out there. If you have a question, this is your one opportunity. I'm going to give them 2 more of mine, and again, I will take at least 2 questions from the audience. Linda, you have this amazing perspective, and you probably don't realize this, but it's something that I have been looking forward to for a long time, and it's sort of 2 different parts, because I know you were telling me earlier today, I know the ghost was in my room too, and that was before watching the film, and it must have been interesting to you to see the pictures of yourself when the...
Well, yeah, earlier when you were showing it from Jeff's laptop.
That's right.
I'm like, oh, that's our room, because it's got the fluffy, the curtains are not the boys' rooms.
That's right.
And the thing is it's been repressed, and I really didn't remember a lot of it.
Yeah.
But as we were watching it, I'm like, the shower, you got scratched.
That's it.
And I didn't remember that before.
It's amazing. It's amazing how that is. And one of the other perspectives that you have is on the light side of things, because you saw the dark, and you're a person, I can tell, who creates positive environments around you. For your children, for the people that you meet, for me. When I talked to you on the phone, I told people, I was like, I just had the best conversation. I'm so happy right now. Not just because I was looking forward to it, but because you're a person of such kind quality. And you have insight into people. We were just talking about Chris went through things that were terrifying, that threw things on their head, but Chris was a accomplished, almost Olympic level runner. He would have gone you know, for the gold if this hadn't happened. He was a person who had his stuff together, and he was also very positive. Do you have any remembrances of your friendship with Chris before the haunting ever happened?
You gotta keep it clean.
Or things that you guys did for fun in Erie Hall or anything like that?
I don't, he really was, he didn't go out a lot. You were telling me earlier when we were having lunch that I took you out because to get him out to do stuff because he was just introverted and other than running,
Right.
you know, so I like to do fun things, so I just like, I don't know, be the good friend. I don't know, I
Take
just
my hand
like,
and pull me out of the room.
you know, he said, I'd always come to your room, and don't you remember that we just would talk? And I'm like, yeah, but you needed to get out.
That is amazing. So that's so cool to me because when we were working on the film and we were developing characters, one thing that we knew was that you brought things out in people and that you had a healing presence. As you saw in that last scene there, you leaned down and you said, you need to find some healing for yourself. You need to get out of this situation. And what we knew about Chris was that while he was very effervescent and positive, he was extremely dedicated to his studies, to his running, and things like that. And again, that provides a lot of contrast for what something as oppressive as an extreme haunting can do. And might I say about all of these people, an extreme and life-threatening or paradigm-shifting circumstance, it seems that it can take off the masks that we put on. We can call ourselves a jock, we can call ourselves a nerd, we could call ourselves a movie director, we can call ourselves anything we want, but underneath it all, when the panic sets in, who are we? And I know that these people would say, oh, I don't know, or I'm embarrassed of who I would be. I think they are all incredible. I have more I'm going to say on that later, but I admire you all. Paul, this is another positive thing where we have a couple questions from the audience. We're talking about Charlie Manning had this amazing moment when he heard Chris on Coast to Coast AM. We've had these interactions with everybody where it's like, how did we end up meeting up? How did we make this circle complete? You had a pretty cool circumstance when you saw that sci-fi episode and the premiere of PTWM Classic. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and just a short backstory is that for my own, I got to jump in and say this, is that I think I realized tonight that the role I played in Chris's life is we weren't close, but again, when he moved to Livingston, I was one of his new steps, I was just a new connection in his life, in his new life. He's trying to get rid of that. And we talked about running, and you took German, didn't you?
I was scared too. I thought about it.
Yeah, Mrs. Kyriakis, yes, she was. But those are the connections we had. And then after he graduated, I never talked to him again. But watching the show, and then up to the sci-fi show, I was at the time, I was in my last year in the radio advertising business after 25 years. I was on the radio here, but when I saw the cars that the salespeople were driving as opposed to the junkers that the DJs were driving, I was going to go for the Mercedes. But anyway, I was in my last year of advertising, and it just so happened that the radio station I worked for in Syracuse, down the thruway, was owned by a gentleman who was partners with the famous Ghost Hunters TV show, and he was putting on his first time event called Scaracuse. And so I started thinking, like, wait a minute, sci-fi, and then I contacted him on Facebook, and then he said, oh, I remember you, yeah, and we started share phone numbers, start talking, and he tells me about the film. And it's pretty much in post-production at that point.
Right.
So it's like, well, Chris, if you want, I can try and see if you can have it screened at my owner's, Syracuse thing. And he jumped on it, and of course, then I met everybody, got reunited with he's got 5 names. I call him Jeff. Jeff, John, Jeff, John, Jacob, Hunchmitz. But anyway, but I call him Jeff. So, and you know, I'm really hoping that after we get through all this, is that the sequel, his next project will be behind the music, the Rolling Gumbies. Okay, I really hope. But anyway, I feel very, very. I remember after the screening over at the pub there by the casino, it just everyone was just floating on air. You know, you all got through it, and Chris was like, I never drink, but I'm having a drink. And he had one sip and he was done. He was just bouncing all over the place.
Myself quick.
Yeah, right. He goes, I said, can I buy you a drink? He goes, I don't drink, but I will. What do you suggest? I go, I'll get you a vodka and 7, I guess. And you had one sip. Roy Rod. Shirley Temple or something. Yeah. But that's just the funny way that life works, man. It's really, really cool.
It's so cool. I'm going to ask them one more question. I can't resist. But again, I will, at least 2 questions. Craig, we talked about this a little bit, but I have to ask you. You talked about how you had that conversation with Chris, and you said it felt accurate to you with regard to the running and things like that. On a different part of that conversation, again, to you it may be nothing. Like, of course I would have that conversation. But again, the paranormal was so different 30 years ago than now. It's something that really was a thing people avoided. Maybe not people such as yourself. But that conversation, I think, really meant a lot to Chris at that time. And what do you think it is about you, your upbringing, your beliefs, that allows you to say, in that kind of a situation, I'm going to have this conversation with somebody?
Well, that's a difficult question.
You're an educator, though, so I know I can throw that.
Yeah, obviously the conversation we had at that moment was off the cuff and just raw emotion. I'm a very direct person. I confront things head on. That's how I've gotten to where I am. I play hockey. I like to go forward. So, you know, when a person I'm familiar with, we weren't quite friends. And again, I'm not trying to, it's kind of like you said, you know, we were acquaintances. I really respected Chris a lot. You talked about how hardworking, and this guy was serious about college, man. And that was a great example. He was serious about running, too, you know. I was a very good runner. I would say Chris was better. And I was no joke. You know, so the conversation was in a lot of ways, an athletic conversation. It's like, quit talking about it. Go out there and do something, man. Don't tell me you're going to punch me, man. You know, just do it. You know, so, you know, no clothes, whatever. I don't care. Let's do it. You know, let's get it on. And so I was just waiting for that moment from, you know, it was like enough talk already. Let's do something, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if that strikes you as accurate.
Mr. Cheserette.
This is the calm me 30 years later. You should have seen me back then, man. I was crazy.
I will be honest and let you know why I was not very close with Craig. I was scared of him. I like things in order and sequence and boxes. I like to plan things out. Do marathons, do carbo loads, do your speed work, your training. He would walk up to someone in the hallway and say, hey, would you say that? That you think that way. He told me one time, you shouldn't walk the same way to class every day. You don't learn that way. You stay taking away to class and learn that way. He challenged me more than I was comfortable being challenged, which is what I needed. Because sometimes you don't want your medicine. Sometimes you want to avoid going to the doctor. And it was just the way it's meant to happen, I suppose, where he just said, you know what, stop running. That's why he said that. It's like, I keep trying to reach out to you, but where are you?
It's not that I wanted to stop running. That's, you know, no, because I loved it so much. It was just, it was a disconnect. I couldn't figure it out.
So I was, you know, just, I admired him. Like I said, he was very direct, and I was, maybe not now, but I was very shy. I was quiet to listen to things.
And it continues, you know, the way you just said it right now. You used to train, you did intervals.
Yeah.
You know, I love to race, but I hate to train. I know it sounds funny. I'll go and run a 50K with no training. You know, that's 32 miles. I'm like, well, I'll just show up. What the hell? It'll hurt a little bit, but whatever. And I really hate training, but I love to go out there and race. You know, but Chris, you know, you were like a scientist, man, and I'm like a Tasmanian devil. You know?
Yeah, that was like 3 or 4 in the morning. He's in the shade, sunglasses on. I'm like, wow, he's racing.
I still wake up pretty early. Wow, I don't need a lot of sleep.
That is so awesome. All right, again, I have many more questions that I would ask them, and maybe I'll be able to meet with them one-on-one someday and ask
all the questions that I have. But in the meantime, questions from the audience. This is your opportunity. Yes, Bill Edwards.
I'll give you the 5-minute warning.
Oh, okay. It was a reticent. It was like
Down the hall to the right.
like 5 minutes, not don't call on me. Yes, you, sir.
You guys mentioned how, Jeff mentioned how everything stemmed off after meeting the Warrens, correct? Were you guys able to ever contact them and ask what that little event was about? She said about the future.
I'll answer that question. You might notice certain patterns in people's behaviors. We have certain things we do when we're nervous, when we're happy. One of the things I do is if I feel like I'm nervous for something, I'll avoid it. She wouldn't shake my hand. I don't know if it was my fault or it's when you're a young teenager and there's a big crowd of people and you're on stage and say, "Well, get off the stage." Oh, that's not right. You feel kind of, I felt kind of sheepish about it. And people have asked me over the years, "Just go out and see her. She's an hour from your house. Go shake her hand. See if she'll do it." I'm afraid of my brother will say, "I'm not shaking his hand." I'd rather just keep it in a place where maybe she'd say, "Now it's okay now." And I just, there's a worry I have. She might have the same reaction that I don't want. It's not logical, I know, but sometimes we're emotional. Sometimes that's what makes us who we are. And so I've never reached out. I probably should, but I haven't. It's something I should probably consider.
Well, she hasn't reached out to you, though.
No, my mom puts my hand.
No, I know, but
No.
but because you're on the internet all over the place, you know, they haven't
Well,
reached out.
she's 90 some odd years
Oh,
old. And she's,
maybe she doesn't
lived a
remember
long life, and I'm half that age. I can't remember what I'm doing. So I wouldn't expect she remembers me. I was some kid on the stage of 150 people. He probably cooler than I did and stuff. I remember him. Yes, that's true.
Excellent question. Other questions from the audience? Mr. Lewis.
For just a quick one for each person on the panel, what was your favorite moment in the movie and why?
Praise me. No. Really don't. Please. Anything that you enjoyed. Why don't we start?
I like the part where his dad
Right.
came. I thought that touched me. I don't, just the father, I have kids now. If you have kids, what would you do for your kids, So that really, hats off to you, that,
Paul, why don't you?
I think my favorite was, see, I took intro to film here, and that was a
Hey,
good
cool.
That's called going to college, where you watch High Noon, Star Wars, Cabaret, and that's what your class is. But you know how, especially like with the Marvel Comics stuff, that Stan Lee always gets a cameo? Well, I just want to let you know that I think Mara did a great job with the cameo, and you probably didn't notice it, but it was the part where Chris and Jeff were shown walking out of Chris's dad's house. Well, Chris's dad was played by a cameo from Alan Arkin. And I want to congratulate Mara on getting that in there.
That's nice.
No, I mean, this is a 30-year-old running joke. When I met him, when he moved into Livingston, I go, "Hey, I had a class with you last month, blah, blah, blah. Oh, this is my dad." I go, "Alan Arkin, your dad?" I mean, that's, just little things like that in life last forever.
That's awesome. Linda, for me, it was because I hadn't seen the movie before.
Yeah.
And I really came here not remembering a lot.
Yes.
But it just started coming to mind, going, oh yeah, so it just kind of, it's nice, so just. Oh, and the Flashdance poster.
Yeah.
You sat back at the
Every Friday at the Bible
the
spot.
vinyl spot, and then the back, yes.
That's right. Oh, that's so awesome. Jeff Ungar.
I can't really say that there was any one part because I love it all. And the reason is, when you approached me to do this project, there were concerns about how the story would be treated. And you promised us that you would tell the story authentically and it would focus on the relationships. And you achieved that. So what I really like about this film, and there's the Please Talk With Me Classic. This is the Please Talk With Me 30th Anniversary Edition. This is a really special edition. And I think that everything that you set out to do is accomplished in this. It is just a glorious piece of filmmaking, I believe personally. And as a fan of cinema myself, I mean, the way that you combine the music, the the edits, the story, the interviews. It's a hybrid. It's something that you just don't see. It's extraordinary. So thank you for that. Thank you.
My favorite part of the movie, not being funny, is the end. Because if you watched after the credits, you see my son.
Yes.
And it's something special. You can make a painting. You can make a song. Those are beautiful things. You make a child, looks back at you and holds on to you and is scared at night. And you teach the child how to laugh, how to learn, how to share, how to grow. And to see my son now, he's a full-grown man. When I think I'd make it through those days. So to see him on there, know that he's in my life, I stayed with him. That's a favorite part of the film. See my son there saying he's proud of me. So,
Charlie Manning.
A few months ago, I was interviewed by this group, Chris and Amara, particularly. We were in a Masonic church, and just before we were going in, I said, I'm Roman Catholic, we can't go into the Masonic temple. I was just joking. So we So into the Masonic temple we went, and where were we? Down in the basement. Yes. And she was interviewing me. I didn't understand how Mara was going to use the interview until we got here tonight. And all of a sudden I'm seeing myself on the movie. That was a nice trick you played. Very good, I thank you for it. But this is going to actually lead to a question. That's what hit me the most, I think, out of the film was, again, your sincerity and the fact that you finally came to the conclusion that it was up to you to deal with the Tommy experience. You had to deal with it. You had to. And this leads me to a question. Why did Tommy pick on you? Why did Tommy choose you?
short straw. Jeff and I would sit in the room and talk for hours and hours about that, because I can tell you all, the paranormal's cool today. It was not cool back then.
Right.
And we'd go through what we could possibly want. And I would pray every night. I would pray, say, please God, just take it away, whatever this is, make it stop. Keep my friends safe. You walked in there, just a few minutes, for all my months of yelling and praying, boom, things slowed down. I think that it must have sensed I could see it, or could hear it. And I imagine that if maybe it had been in this place for a long time and no one did, maybe it sensed to me an opportunity, a hope, a chance. I think when I didn't respond to it as maybe I should have, because I was young and immature and scared, maybe it made it frightened, afraid. Even though your best animal will scratch in the corner, you know? These people scratch out sometimes are angry or tired or feel a little neglected. I think perhaps it saw in me an answer that I didn't know was there. And I think that with your help and Jeff's help and everyone's help here in the panel, I allowed myself to go into that room and maybe give the answer you needed to hear, which is, please rest. If someone loves you, it's time to go home.
I just want to say I feel compelled. Mr. Lewis, thank you for that amazing question. I feel sheepish about it, obviously, because the truth of the matter is just thank you. Thank each of you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Charlie. That's it. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for being a part of this panel.